Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen, Highway Commissioner, Cemetery Commissioner meeting of Monday, July 24, 2017 at 6:38 p.m. First order of business, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How do we uphold the indivisible part of that? We need some work on that.
No, it's worked for 240-something years.
Yeah.
First order of business, the minutes of July 10th, 2017. What is the board's pleasure?
Chairman, I'm going to move that we approve the minutes of July 10th, 2017 as printed.
I second that.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Mr. Sigenovich. Upon discussion, I'm going to abstain because I did not have a chance to review the tape. All in favor of the motion state aye.
Aye.
Nay, one abstention.
So the vote is 2 in favor, 201.
Yes. Next up, Constable, reappointment, term to expire 6/30/2018 for Sean Guerin. With the pleasure of the board, at this time, I would ask that we table this to our next meeting if possible for a couple of reasons. One, I would like to have the whole board present. And two, I believe we are in the process or in the beginning phases of creating a job description / qualification.
And I know Jonathan wanted to see the job description before we continue with any new appointments.
Yes.
So if you declare that we're going to table it, by our procedures, automatically goes on the next agenda.
That's okay with the board?
Yep.
Yes.
Greg, can we move on to the next meeting for that one?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Next up, Council of Aging, appointment, Janice B. Brady, term to expire 6/30/2019. Is she present? Greg, what can you tell us about the applicant?
I don't know much about the applicant other than the person submitted their name, and I thought they would be here this evening.
Michelle, did she come in and see you?
Yes, she did.
What can you tell us?
She attends chair yoga, and she goes down for lunches, and she's friends with a lot of the ladies down there.
This is to fill,
About her.
sorry, this is to fill a vacancy
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
from when Sharon Nelson resigned?
No, Sharon Nelson, she resigned, and that was her term to expire, was the end of next year.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we, although it's unusual not to have the candidate present, as I look at her application, she's got certainly experience as a nurse with the Memory Cafe, the church. She does not work full-time, so she indicates she should certainly be available. So I'm going to move that we appoint Janice B. Brady, Council on Aging, for a term to expire June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Joseph, second by Mr. Sigenovich. I just want to point out that under one of her reasons for volunteering, she wants to help aging in the town. If she can find a way to reverse aging, we would appreciate that help also.
Yeah, she's going to be well worth it.
Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank Janice Brady for stepping up. Next on the agenda, Historical Commissioner, reappointment of Frederick Meyer, term to expire 6/30/2018. Is he present?
Is he here?
Do not see him.
Yeah, it's a reappointment, though.
Reappointment. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we reappoint Frederick Meyer to the Historical Commission with a term to expire June 30th, 2018.
Motion
Second.
made by Mr. Joseph, second by Mr. Sigenovich. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Public comment, citizens' comment. Anybody wishing to speak that is not on the agenda with an informal issue? Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Oh, nice to be seen, thank you.
Better be seen, yes.
My name is Richard Clark. I reside at 65 Airport Road here in Dudley. Good evening, gentlemen. It's not really informal in terms of the topic that I'd like to address, but it is one I think that should be uppermost in our concerns, and that is the continual rampant speeding in Dudley. I did send an email. I apologize. It was just the day, I think earlier today, actually, that I did send it to you. I misdirected it the first time out. But what triggered my thought was an article, front page, Worcester Telegram, 7/19, rampant speeding. It addressed the issue in the town, city of Worcester, rather. And along with that article, there were a number of strategies that were apparently under consideration in Worcester. And I was hoping, and I apologize again for the tardiness in terms of my communication to you gentlemen, that some of those thoughts might be given some consideration here in Dudley. One of them, which I suspect would probably not be found favorable, was the idea of reducing the speed limit in the city of Worcester. I'm not calling for that, I'm not advocating in behalf of that, but I do think some of those strategies are, again, worth consideration. Mr. Siganevich, hats off to you in terms of your backing out of your driveway or even attempting to do so. I don't know how you do that. I'm not sure if getting your mail is akin to a near-death experience on some occasions, because as you and I both know, they fly up and down Airport Road. I mean, it is completely ridiculous at sometimes during the day. They just up and down 50 miles an hour and nobody thinks twice about it. In fact, if you're doing 30 and look in your rearview mirror, you can see a lot of disgruntled people behind you in pretty short order. I can guarantee you that much. Again, I would ask that the town take this matter seriously. I would hate for something tragic to happen, but I think the law of averages are against us in that regard, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Chief, do you want to address that at all? Or?
Chief, can you come on up and join us?
I mean, we're not looking for a consensus or a vote on a non-agenda item, but you want to just generally speak on that a little bit?
Well, Airport Road is one of the streets, like I don't know how many others in town, where we have very similar complaints. So we try to get around to different areas and do different things. I can name 20 different roads off the top of my head that have the very same issue. The speeding issue is something that's taking place now, whether there's more vehicles on the road, whether it's people that just aren't paying as much attention, whatever the issue is, speed has increased, definitely. So it's one of those things that we try to keep a handle on as best we can.
How
Mr. Joseph?
How often, two questions. One is, do we periodically, and I might know the answer to this already, do we periodically get grants from the state for moving violation enforcement? That's number one. And number two, aside from that, how often would you estimate we have an officer on duty that can run radar checks because they're not doing something else?
Well, first, to answer the first question is yes, we do get grants for traffic enforcement. A lot of those are centered around certain times of the year, so we'll run them generally whenever the grant period opens. So a lot of times you can take it around Memorial Day, Labor Day, Christmas, New Year's, those types of things. So we have grants that focus on those times. We had some that were specifically for texting and driving. We had some that are more for impaired operators. We have certain things that they want us to focus on for those types of grants. It's hard to say when do you have somebody else that can just go do something, because that's going to depend on a lot of things. We try to get people out there to do traffic whenever we have people available. It depends on your call volume during the course of the day, what other things are pending, what other issues we're dealing with. Times are pretty busy, especially right now. When you get people that go on vacation and you have other things you have to try to fill and then handle the regular business that goes on. So we try to put people out there. But again, the issue is Airport Road is a problem area, yes. Yeah, I'm sure you're well aware of Alton Drive. Go to Dudley Oxford Road, go to Charlton Road, go to Oxford Ave, go to 131.
Mason Road.
Go to Schofield Ave, go to Mason Road.
Yep.
Go up to Wayne Ave, that Dudley Oxford Road area up there, Pierpoint Road, Ramshorn Road. The list goes on and on and on. So that's one of the things, is we try to spread things out and get things in areas where we can go out and do things.
One more question?
If I may, I would add one point. I think the chief is correct in that the volume of traffic has increased over time. I also think that the number of pedestrians that are on these roads that you mentioned has increased over time, too. I mean, in the length of time that I've been on Airport Road, the number of people that walk that road has grown significantly. And many times it's people with younger children and bicyclists as well. And we have no sidewalks. effectively. I mean, down at the very bottom there is, but otherwise there's none. Those people are, I would say, at risk on a daily basis. If they're literally taking their lives in their hands when they're out there walking that road. I mean, I cut my grass and I'm up against the road, and I'm telling you, there are times when I'm not sure whether I have time to duck or not.
Chief, how often do we push, does the department push and run radar traps, thoroughly in order to get speeders? How often do we do that? I know that they're periodically parked on West Main Street. I know I see them on Airport. I don't see them on Mason when I travel there. But the section of Dudley Southbridge Road from Dudley Hill to 31, I don't know if there's any streetlights out there at all. And I know there are people who jog. I see them because I travel that. How often do we how often do we make a concentrated effort to set up radar traps to get the message out?
Well, we try to do them several times a week, if we can. I mean, but again, the problem becomes on what happens. We can't tell what's happening.
Right.
So it's not a job where you can show up in the morning and say, okay, from 7 to 8 you're going to do this, and then from 9 to 10 you're going to do this. Things change at the drop of a hat. So we try to focus it, and I'm working with my sergeants to get regular people out there to do things. But several times a week we're out in different places doing different things.
Do either of you have any suggestions? That's my final question, Steve. Do either of you have any, not questions, but suggestions of what you think you would, or what would you recommend be done?
In that communication that I sent, I had some thoughts in terms of, I think one possibility might be either increased signage or moving the signs that we have, because I think they've just become background noise at this point. People are so used to ignoring them, they don't even see them any longer. Another thought would be a no-tolerance policy. No more warnings, you get a ticket. I think we need to create a mindset. I mean, there are some communities, and not that far away, where you know you don't speed in that town, or you're going to be stopped. And yes, I do mean Douglas, if anybody's not sure about that. We need that sort of mindset here in Dudley. And I think one of the assumptions that a lot of folks in town make is that it's the students, if you will. And I won't point fingers in terms of which ones in particular, but they're not in session right now. And this is still ongoing. I talked to one of my neighbors today, and they have young children, and they're concerned about their children being out in the driveway. I think it's 30 miles an hour, 44 feet you move in a second. And that's the legal speed limit, 30 miles an hour. If you're doing 50, I don't even know what it is in terms of how many feet you've moved in a second. Now, again, I submit that we are running out of time. Something's going to happen one of these days, and I would submit the chief probably has already investigated a number of accidents where speed was a contributing factor, and it probably did not end well for the people involved.
No, we've had several accidents, I think, but if we have to prioritize that, I look at the whole community in one shot. If you want to talk about an area that we have the biggest problem, I would tell you that the biggest problem is Brandon Road and Schofield Ave.
There was one there the other day.
If I have to look at something and say, what's priority one in town, if you have to fix something, that's number one. Certainly enforcement and different things in certain areas will help. But between the lights at Schofield Ave down here, the accidents, Brandon Road, big spot, Oxford Avenue, Pine Street, Charlton Road, those areas, high traffic volume, high accident rates. So I have to look at the whole community in one shot, and there's several problem areas that we have to address and have to look at.
I don't mean to speak.
The issue becomes, spending either money or finances or whatever we're going to do. How do we direct those resources? I know we've had a few discussions with Central Mass Regional Planning, and those things have come up. Have us identify areas that we can target. So there's certain things in the mix that we have to address. I don't know where we're at on the traffic light down here. When we're at it, I don't know if that's still in the mix. I know we voted some money at the town meeting. We were waiting to get donations or something else to fix the traffic light down there. So that's again one thing to look at.
Chief, any thought to just crazy thinking, like changing some of the traffic flow patterns and something as radical as even as Brandon Road is one way going up, George Street's one way going down, move the traffic away from each other, kind of, that kind of mentality.
There's a lot of things we looked at, and we looked at it too with Alton Drive. I don't know if you can remember looking at that, and did we make it one-way traffic going in certain areas and stuff like that? So the problem becomes, in some ways, are you now adding a problem in another area where you don't have a problem? So that's always something to take a look at as we do these things. But I'm certainly open to any suggestions, and I'm going to definitely pass this on to the troops. And between beach checks, make sure we're out there doing our traffic enforcement.
And, that's perfect. It's a much minor example. Perfect example. You guys got some presence down there, and as far as I know, we haven't had an issue there, like a real substantial issue there. And this year, a couple of little ones, but nothing like there was before.
If I may, I don't mean to speak for the chief, but I'm wondering, are you properly staffed? Or do we need more people? I mean, do we need more personnel out there? Is the police department being tasked with more than it can accomplish given the resources available?
Well, I think we could always use people, and we're still short of people where we were even 10 or 15 years ago. We have less people now than we did back then. I think it's the same with everybody. That's the unfortunate thing. So we try to add to that. We have added to it over the last couple of years put a few people on, but certainly the staffing level is big. That's a huge issue, because as issues come up during the day, you have to deal with them. And average case comes along, an officer gets tied up probably for 4 hours with something.
Mm-hmm.
So when they could be out doing something else, they're tied up with doing that other task that comes to hand, especially if it's an arrest or something else of that nature.
Chief, not to call it a revenue source, I know we've had this discussion on camera before, but what is the breakdown of a ticket? Is there a percent that the state gives back to the towns?
I believe it's like 30% the town gets back somewhere along the way. I don't know the exact breakdown of it, but it's handled through the registry, but there's some formula they utilize. But again, we're not in the business to go out there and write tickets just to generate money. That's not the business of it. So we certainly will address it where it needs to be addressed, and you see the reports, we do issue a lot of tickets and everything over time. So it's just something, another thing to focus on.
Thank you.
Stay in touch, Mr. Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Anybody else wishing to be heard on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to 5. Town Administrator Report, and before Greg gets into item A, I'm not going to recuse myself because he's only giving a status on a public document. There's not going to be any action taken tonight. Is that correct?
I'm going to, based on what Greg says, I would make a motion at the appropriate time to acknowledge receipt of the cost for legal defense as submitted by town council and the town administrator. And I don't think that would, but I would follow Greg's advice. It's simply acknowledging receipt.
Right, it's going to become a public document. You're not looking for action tonight, Greg. You're just updating us, right?
Yeah, excuse me, the board had asked me to give you a summary of what the cost was for legal defense, not only for the lawsuit, but for the related investigations and the special permit action related to the Islamic Cemetery, Greater Worcester. And as you can see, we spent $47,298.70. These costs represent the cost of town council services. We also did have special counsel, which was covered through our insurance vendor. However, we did pay a deductible, which is shown here in the amount of $5,000. Just to kind of walk you through some of the time frame that's here to refresh your memories. The special permit application would have been filed in January of 2016. The lawsuit would have been filed against the ZBA July of 2016. The DOJ provided notice to the town about a potential investigation going back to November of 2016, and they commenced with interviews of town officials in December of 2016. So you can see the big slug of hours involved with that. The town eventually did reach a settlement, and signed that settlement at the end of December in 2016. You can see the corresponding drop in hours associated with that. And then on April 14th, the society indicated that they had withdrawn from the project and were no longer pursuing the Dudley location. So you can see the hours drop after that. And those are kind of the main points that I just wanted to make.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Greg, do you see any conflict if Mr. Sullivan votes on the motion to acknowledge receipt?
I think that's all we're merely looking for, is to acknowledge receipt. The board had asked for it. I'm not asking you to take any further actions on it.
All right, then, I'm going to move that we acknowledge receipt of the cost for legal defense received from town council and the town administrator as included in our agenda items for this meeting, period.
Motion made by Mr. Joseph.
Second.
Second, Mr. Sigenovich. And I just want to repeat again, to be clear, I'm only voting to release this as a public document. I have no knowledge as to what these breakdown hours represent. I have no idea what was discussed, when it was discussed, how it was discussed. This is just to put a document into the public domain.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Everybody at home wondering, you can find out now. Mr.
And we-
Valkunas.
And we have all the bills if anyone wants to come in and peruse through them.
Revenue expense, 2017, final.
Yep, so what we do is, the town's fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. And so we would have ended our fiscal year 2016 about a month ago on June 30th. And what I'd like to do is just give the board an opportunity to kind of know where we stand as a snapshot at the end of the fiscal year. And in general terms, we were to the positive, $475,295. That consists of departmental spending being under budget by $105,240, and you have a listing of what that is. And then bringing in revenues, because it's the two-sided budget, the revenues and the expenses. So on the revenue side, the town would have brought in through its fees, permits, applications, interest payments, and the major portion is motor vehicle excise tax, $370,055. And you have a breakdown of what those accounts are. Some items of noteworthy as you look at the revenue report, which I would ask you to take a peek at. Tax title was money that the town brings in for properties that have been put into tax title, and it's redeemed as people decide that they wish to have the town release its deed. So it's $185,175.41, which is a significant amount of money and really reflects the hard work of Mr. Kamignani and his crew down in the Treasurer Collector's Office. The other item that's particularly noteworthy is under permits, building, 90% of the way down. You'll see the total amount that was brought in was $214,411.17. $84,984 to the good, which is really substantial, and I think I had reported to the board that reflects the permit fees for the solar facilities in town. The bad news is we won't see a number that high again for this fiscal year, but we weren't so crazy to budget what we thought we were gonna receive for last year. And then the last item that you wanna look at on the back page is, solid waste. So we have an item called solid waste management stickers. So we budgeted $152,000. We brought in $154,342.50, or a total of $2,342.50 to the good. And I think there's been some question in the past in terms of whether the permit or the operation of the recycling center is covered by the fees, and this does demonstrate that it is. But what it does also show is that we don't have an opportunity to expand the operations much beyond what they are right now. And there's often a talk that we should restore additional days. If we do, that necessitates an increase in the permit fee amount. So I know in past years, Mr. Guyan will tell you that there were substantial monies that were turned back to the town through that account. This year, the amount that's being turned back is relatively modest in comparison to what we may have seen in the past.
So is it fair to summarize by acknowledging or making a motion at some point to acknowledge that the balance from the first packet, that the balance remaining from the budgeted amount for fiscal 2017 is 105, 239.37?
That's right, Paul.
Okay? And is it fair to also acknowledge that the revenues, actual revenues, were approximately $337,055.34 above what was budgeted?
370,055.34.
Okay? Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Then I'd like it entered into the record for those who don't want to have to read the entire documents, to acknowledge receipt of the fiscal 2017 revenues and expenses as showing that the balance remaining from the budgeted amount for FY 2017, which ended on June 30th, is $105,239.37, and also to acknowledge that the actual revenues over what was budgeted for FY 2017 was $370,055.34 above what was anticipated. That's my motion.
But just to state the amounts public,
I beg your pardon?
just to state the amounts publicly, so people don't have to. peruse.
Absolutely, so people can simply look at our minutes and know what the overall outcome of the fiscal year was.
Motion made by Mr. Joseph.
Second.
Question?
No question, but the next step is the accounting department prepares the balance sheet for fiscal year 2017. That then gets submitted to the Department of Revenue, who comes back and certifies our free cash in time for fall town meeting. And based upon this number, we expect it to be a positive number. So, this kind of just validates that and begins that process.
Before I call to a vote, I just have two quick questions going over this, Greg. Under oil burner equipment permits,
Under which amount?
third one, second page on
Is
revenues.
this expenditures?
Revenues.
Okay,
Second page,
yep.
third one down. We budgeted zero, we have zero, so does that mean no one pulled an oil burner permit all year?
No, it means it's probably covered under a different fee amount. So there were fees that were brought in. It's usually flagged as departmental revenue. And so it's part of another item. People definitely will pull permits.
And then I have a question for the superintendent. Danny, the number that we got as budgeted and actual for the recycling center, what does that show you? Do you have the numbers on how many stickers up or down from last year? I know there's other miscellaneous revenue.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I believe we're down a little bit from previous years. Also, you lose a little bit of money when people turn 65. So you'll have a lot of users, not a lot, but significant amount of users going from a regular permit down to a senior citizen permit, which is about a $60 difference.
Okay. So the number, can you give us that number at some point?
I can get it for you, sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Greg, what would be miscellaneous revenue?
Anything and everything under the sun, Sully. We could get your breakdown, but the categories that are shown here are not items that we make up. This is what the DOR requires us to report, so
Okay.
there's uniformity amongst every city and
But
town.
we have most things earmarked for revolving accounts.
We do,
Yeah.
and miscellaneous is anything that doesn't fall into one of these categories. As I look through the list, and the fire chief isn't here, the good news is, and one of the significant things that was done is our fire department ambulance fees were $5,559 over what we had budgeted, and that's pretty significant, because a year ago, I reported that we didn't meet our budget total. So, the budget total is not an insignificant amount of money, it's $510,000, and the receipt was $515,559. So, it's a big number, and it's good that we met our target. For 2018, I think I've mentioned to you, we're pretty conservative in terms of what we estimate our receipts on. This document now gives us a chance to go back and see how we might want to tweak our receipts for fiscal year 2018. And that will be included as recommendations leading up to our fall town meeting. But the good news is, it means that we have a little bit more money to fund our service. We may have a little bit more money to fund our services at the fall town meeting.
So we'll see these figures as we get into the next budget cycle, too.
Yeah, well, we're going to see these figures because what we need to do is we need to true up our fiscal year 2018 revenues in time for fall town meeting. So we go into spring town meeting in May with estimates based upon what we think we're going to receive for next year, but we are still in the middle of the fiscal year 2017. So it gives us now a good opportunity to look back and know exactly what we brought in fiscal year 2017, and then use those numbers to carry forward and see how we might want to make adjustments to the year that we're in right now, fiscal 2018.
Mr. Chairman.
Good.
Greg, where would I find, or where would anybody find the revenue received from pilot?
We would have that. We would show that.
From solar arrays.
So we'll show that. To this point, the DOR actually requires us to report that as a separate item.
Okay.
So going forward, we'll be able to report that as it's called payment in lieu of tax revenue, but will be on the exact same sheet that you have in front of you.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question before I call it to a vote, more of a comment. I noticed Chief, I noticed the detail account is running over what we budgeted. I think that's good. I know you've been tightening up on that the last couple of years with the vendors. Unless I'm reading this wrong, Greg, on the first page.
It always shows a deficit, and what happens is we have until September 1st to collect any funds from the previous year that offsets those. So if you see, even, I don't know if you have the beginning figure, but you'll see the year started sometime in July of last year, or at the end of June, when the account was put together. We started out about 38,000 something in the hole, somewhere in that range. So that's a consistent rolling thing, that there's a negative in there. When you think of it, how if you date it back until like the middle of May, take every detail that's been worked from that time until the end of June that you haven't been paid for yet, that's why you have that deficit that shows up in there. So we have until September 1st to collect anything from the old year and apply it. So as our deposits are made on a weekly basis, they're checked off for old year, new year bills. Debbie offsets that, and then we work with the auditors to clean that up.
So what am I looking at then, Greg, what says, is that just administration fees?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's running ahead of what we projected, so.
Well, we built a lot of details last year. I didn't run the final figure on it, but I'd say it was probably about $350,000 or $325,000 that we built total for the year. So not all those apply, obviously, to admin fees, but a lot of them do. So we take that in addition to the cruiser fund money that comes in. But if you see the account where the salaries are talking, that's what I was addressing. That's all. That usually shows a negative at that time.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any further comments or observations?
No, I think that people should know that despite the unpredictable vagaries of police, fire, highway from year to year, that the total highway department budget, and we've made note of it, we've had a pretty eventful year. And the total budget was overspent by a total of $790, I think, 18 cents, which is, believe me, admirable for what got thrown our way this year. I just want to make note of that.
Yeah, it started off like a lamb, but it came back like a lion at the end.
It got hairy during the year, yeah.
Mr. Signovich, anything you want to add?
No, I'm good.
That's
I'm
former
good, thank you.
finance chair. All discussion ended. Call to a vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Nice report. Thank you, department heads, also. Next up, around town, focusing on local business. I think,
I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, I apologize, there was one more item that I had. Just to introduce, there's a resident by the name of Samantha Costello, 50 Center Road, who, I believe she's here this evening? No, oh, you are here. Hi, nice to meet you. She has a plan of land that she submitted to the town, and I told her I would introduce it tonight. I'm not asking you to take any action, but the plan proposes either an easement or acquisition of property on Center Road, which would allow Ms. Costello to further access her property. She's located in the very back beyond 52 Center Road, and access to the home is difficult. She's included a letter to us, and one of the potential solutions is for the town to sell property that it owns that's unoccupied, and in my judgment, very difficult for us to do anything with it, to Ms. Costello, or grant her an easement across the same property. And my thought is scheduling this for discussion and getting input from other departments so that it can come back before you at a future meeting. And like I said, I have a plan that's here that does show the potential location. And just one.
are we looking just to acknowledge?
Just to acknowledge. Just to acknowledge, and like I said, it's not marked up for discussion, so you cannot act on it tonight. It is a little bit unusual in the sense that you know, we would be looking to sell property in that area, and typically my thought is that the town should hold on to what it has, but in this case, I don't feel that the land really has much value to us.
What's the address?
50 Center Road.
Chair, look for a motion to acknowledge receipt and to schedule it for a further meeting for discussion and information.
What are we acknowledging receipt of the request?
Request, and then we'll schedule it for discussion at an upcoming meeting where we can get input from town departments and have Ms. Costello come in and make her proposal before the board.
And that'll be via a public hearing?
I'm not sure it necessarily requires a public hearing at this point, Paul. If you decide that you want to sell the land, then perhaps at that point, it might be okay to have it, but at this stage, I think it's preliminary. It's whether you think the idea is feasible, whether you want to do it or not.
All right,
All right, I would just like a
go ahead. Go ahead.
more detailed, I read that letter, I saw it,
You saw it?
yes, but I'd like a little more detail than green line, the blue line, and the yellow line.
Right. So I've got a little bit of the plan.
I'll take it away from the microphone, so
Yeah.
it sounds like a thunderstorm.
That's
It
a
doesn't.
thunderstorm.
Okay. How about if I put it upside up?
Yeah, I got the gist of it, I just would like to have a little better, more definitive description and,
We still have blue, green, and yellow, don't we?
correct.
So the town's piece is the yellow piece, I think is what the legend says.
At the top of the map.
Yeah, it's the piece that drops pretty much straight off of Center Road.
Center Road's over here.
Right, but I think he's saying this is the piece that we own, so that's what, I just, we need a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah,
little better, shows better on this map. I believe that's the piece he's talking about, we own.
we only own that one side? I mean, we only own on this side of Center Road? Please?
You can come up, please. We must own that piece too, then.
Yeah, right here.
I would think.
It crosses Center Road to the other side.
Is this the gully?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now I know where it is. Okay. Yeah, better detail. So you know what, let's not mess around with this. I'm gonna move that we acknowledge receipt of the request from Ms. Crowley
Costello.
Costello. You changed your name?
No,
Okay, maybe I
did.
did.
he changed it for me.
Um,
It was
and
inexpensive, too.
to ask that it be placed on the agenda for a future Board of Selectmen's meeting.
Absolutely.
Just stay in touch with Greg or Michelle and
Will do, thank you.
let
Sec-
Danny take a look at
You
it.
want a second?
Yeah, second.
Second.
Yes, please.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, state aye.
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 Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Downtown, focusing on local business. I don't think we have anybody tonight.
Okay, is that all right? Okay.
We just
Thank you
can't
for
do anything
coming.
because it's not on the agenda. And we need a little bit more. I think we've kind of taken a little break from local business with the summers, but we'll keep it on. We'll probably crank it up again in the fall, I would think.
Yeah, I've got a couple people lined up that I've talked to, and we're going to expand it to people in Dudley who own businesses that may not be in town,
Right, that's
all
okay.
right? And I think I love doing that. And there are others I've lined up who fit into the stricter category, but yeah.
I would like to see too, maybe, could we get someone from, say, like Gentex come in maybe? Because they're a pretty big employer, pretty big taxpayer. I mean, they don't have to give us a full-blown presentation, but it'd be nice to acknowledge that they've chosen to do what they've done here with their expansions and all that.
Yeah, and you know what? There's the people that moved into Tinsley Plaza, the last store, which is the longer one on the left, and I think they do everything but milk cows. You know, they got a lot of services there. I've talked to a few people who have gone in there, gotten services, and said they're very pleased. Everything from copying to T-shirts and a whole lot of other stuff.
I think there was an article on them recently in
Yeah.
the Webster Times.
You know, I'd love to see them come in, but, yeah, I like to go out and solicit people.
I mean, I'd like to see some of the bigger ones
Yeah.
get recognized, maybe at some point Hanky, Sass, and Wolf, you know, people that have chosen,
Hank, yeah,
especially Hanky, who stayed in town, Gentex who expanded in town. Nice to acknowledge them.
I think that's great. Let's do that.
Perfect. Public hearings, none. What a shame. Public business. First up, Susan Etheridge, trustee of the Paracchio Leahy Trust. Did I say that correct?
Yes, good job.
Temporary construction easement agreements on 2 and 6 Klondike.
So can someone tell me what a temporary easement is versus one that isn't temporary?
I think in this case, Greg, the temporary is just gonna be like a
Temporary
placeholder
allows,
until we get to a final.
temporary allows them to proceed until they can prepare a final plan, which will be include a meets and bounds description, would actually be a legal plan that would be filed.
Just like a placeholder.
Correct.
So does that mean that there's no turning back from a temporary construction easement?
Oh, I think there
That
is.
you have to then do a permanent construction easement?
I think they go together, Paul.
Well,
I mean, if you,
the word
if-
temporary means one thing, and I need to understand,
but once the pipes are in the ground,
yeah.
they're in the ground, which means you gotta go to the next step, which means you have to do permanent.
So it's really not temporary,
Temporary.
much as it is a preliminary.
I think so. You saw council's opinion kind of talks a little bit about that. And,
I think the language has to refer to it as temporary, right?
he does. He specifically wants the words temporary construction easement to be used. And then he indicates that, at some point, it would need to become permanent upon receipt of an as-built plan, which is required by the agreement.
Okay, I just want you to know that I trust town council explicitly, and I'm sure he's going by some statutory requirement. But it wouldn't be the first time that I disagree with statutory retirements, and I think it ought to be preliminary rather than temporary. Temporary is, we don't like it, take the shit out. And that's not the way it works. It's preliminary, and then it'll be final, rather than temporary and permanent. That's just my concern.
I think the temporary gives a form of control to, like a sunset provision.
Yeah, I think it has some meaning under the law.
I believe I.
I'm
because-
sure it does.
Because temporary easement is used in the law, preliminary easement is probably something that you don't see very often.
All right,
'Cause I would, for
I'm
example.
sorry, I used a bad word, but that's what I was
know,
thinking.
We have a 7-second delay.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get rid of that for me?
Too late.
You didn't? Thanks a lot, Fred.
On the internet too now, people can.
Okay. Yeah,
We get to be a certain age and get liberties.
yeah.
So, Greg, if you want to just, have you shared the email with the applicants?
That's a good question. I hope they're in agreement that everything is okay.
You have
this
seen
year.
it
Yes,
and agreed?
yes.
And if everyone's in agreement, then the board members should take a motion to approve the temporary construction easement as recommended by town council.
Chair will entertain a motion acting upon town council's recommendation to title it modify the title to read temporary construction easement agreement.
I'm gonna move that, despite what I've said earlier, but I am gonna move that. And after the motion, I would like read into the minutes, certain, text from, Gary's opinion. But yes, I am moving that.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. Greg, Mike, one quick question. I don't see Gary recommending a sunset provision on that temporary easement. Is that something we need to put in a motion, or we just leave it open-ended till they provide the final document?
I would imagine it's in the property owner's interest to get finality in this thing and file a permanent document, because it's pretty hard to sell the property without a legal paper trail to prove your case.
Yes,
So I'm anticipating that there'll be compliance,
yes, absolutely,
because you can't sell it.
absolutely.
So was that a yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
So we're not gonna put an ending date, we're not
no
gonna
ending date.
come in by,
All right. So we have a motion made and seconded.
yes.
Could I refer to specific language in Gary's, Attorney Brackett's opinion
Yes.
that I'd like read into the record? In the, after he addresses Greg, I would make note that the agreement, this is from Gary Brackett, the agreements would each allow the installation of water and septic system pipes and electrical lines under Klondike Road, a public way, to serve the two houses on Parcel 1 at 2 Klondike Road and Parcel 1 at 6 Klondike Road. All right? Then he notes that the two agreements state that the easement area shall be, quote, in the approximate location on the attached sketch plan, end quote. No specific meets and bounds description of the easement area is provided in the agreements, and he recommends that any final documents contain specific meets and bounds description in order to ensure the proper placement of the utilities and guarantee the scope of the area for which the grantee will be responsible in the future. That's it.
Good with that?
I'm good with that.
Folks are aware of that and agree to that?
Yes,
Greg, anything else to add?
No, I think we've done everything we can on this.
All right, there was one question I had had before, not concerning their property, and I got a general answer. I was made aware, after that first meeting I was at, these ladies came in. Has it been allowed previously underneath Klondike? We never got a definitive.
We're still looking at it. I've been down there, and I could find no evidence of any, because after you mentioned it, I went down and looked. I couldn't find any evidence, but I'm probably not the right guy.
Not just Klondike, I mean, my scope was like any town road. Have we ever had allowed it in the past, that's all. I just wanted,
Well, we shouldn't, Sully, because like I said, I mean, the problem those people are gonna have, it's gonna become self-correcting, because when those people go to sell the property, they're not gonna be able to sell the property with a pipe going under a road unless they have an easement. The days of sloppy legal work are over if someone wants to get a loan.
right, I was more concerned with if there was an issue with the pipe itself while they were, I mean, I don't think you intend to sell right now anyway, you guys
No,
wanna build.
No, but
it's been-
you're doing the right thing absolutely by coming here, because
My
you
biggest
can't
fear
get
was-
financing if you've got a pipe and there's no easement.
Right, my biggest fear was if there was a problem, I wanted to make sure the town was covered, that we wouldn't be responsible, that Danny wouldn't have to go out there with the backhoe at
Right?
2 o'clock.
No, I thought we made that clear last meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't here, so.
And that language stayed in Attorney Brackett's agreement, number 2.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, I just wanted, I was looking for the answers to those questions. I hadn't got them yet, that's all.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Could I also point out that on July 20th, Michelle wrote to the fire chief and asked, would a trench permit be needed for this issue on Klondike Road, where sewer and water pipes will be installed under the road by pushing the pipes through and not disturbing the asphalt? Do we have a response from the chief?
It's on the same page.
Up top, it says, issue permits, but don't have to for that, he said.
Okay, I see it. Yes, issue permits, but issue permits.
The fire department issues the
Okay.
trench permits.
And you're aware of that now?
Yes,
Okay, want to be sure.
thank you.
All right.
Danny, you don't do trench permits? No, fire. It's all straight fire, because it's public safety?
Okay. Danny, Mr. Chairman, Danny, do you have any comments before we get into voting this temporary permit?
No, my only comment would be that as long as the road isn't damaged, and if it is, it has to be repaired. And I'm not only worried about these people, but if they sell 10, 15 years from now, makes it a new owner.
Fred, can that be picked up on the,
You need Danny to
I
telecast?
wasn't aware the road was gonna be, there was gonna be bored
Would you
under.
come up? One of these mics should be good, Danny. Come be a selectman for a little bit. And then be prepared to bear the consequences.
He wants no part of that.
Well, I was not aware that the road was not gonna be dug up for the pipes. I just hope they're gonna be deep enough so the water line does not freeze. If the road's not gonna be dug up, then we don't need any road opening fees or permit.
But now they're looking for a trench, so obviously they're gonna open up the road.
No, they're
Are
not,
you
they're
gonna
not,
bore, you're gonna bore? Oh, okay.
if they're gonna
they
bore
are
under,
gonna
they're not
bore.
need, they're boring under, so there's no
Okay.
need to, issue a road opening permit, because they're not gonna disturb the asphalt.
Okay,
No
so,
settling?
They shouldn't settle, I mean, if it's gonna have to be at least 4 feet down, if not deeper. There should be no problems at all, because they're not disturbing the surface.
okay,
Okay. Thank you.
thanks, Danny.
So somewhere I think we have a motion made in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna ask Michelle to read it back, because she said she has it. So any further discussion, any questions from the applicants or their representative? Greg, you all set?
I'm all set.
Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
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 Unanimous. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
We'll have that final document, or you will, and we'll,
Thank you.
good luck.
know it's coming, I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I believe so, right, Greg?
Soon as we get it, we'll make sure they get a copy.
Okay.
You have any comments? No, not this time. Okay,
Thank
all right.
you.
Thank you.
We're pleased to have resolution.
Well, thank you for your patience. But I think it actually moved kind of quick, I think,
It's
actually.
a lot easier to do it this way than the
You-
other
you
way
don't want-
around, which is you
No.
discover there's a problem down the road.
You don't want to come back again?
Not
Well, they're gonna
right now,
have to for
thank
the
you.
final,
Thank you.
you're gonna have to for the final
You and I
document.
retire, I'll run for the select
Which-
board.
Oh, you can have it.
Which,
Starting next May.
which side of Klondike are you? You on the right or the left? I mean, as you get to the end of it,
We're the first
you
house.
come down the hill, is it left or
Starting next
right?
May.
Come down Bonnie View.
Yep.
Then you go right, and we're the first house in Dudley. Klondike Road turns to Beach Road. And we're that first house, if you're coming from Beach Road, the last house on Klondike, if you're coming from Bonnie
Two
View.
copies, right?
Yeah,
We own both sides of the road.
right.
And there's excavation on the other side of the road, isn't there? Is that why?
Correct.
yeah,
That's where we had approval from Conservation and Public Health to do the well and the septic.
Okay.
So we are pleased that we're doing things so green, rather than trying to use the old cesspool and a shallow well.
Oh, yeah, there'll be issues. I'm sure there'll be issues.
Right, so we feel very pleased that we have both sides of the road to be able to do this.
So if you
And
move
my,
in.
and my parents would be very happy to know that we're continuing the family legacy of living on that beautiful pond.
Oh, it's a nice neighborhood, a lot of nice
It is.
people up there, too.
It is. So we're grateful. Thank
Well,
you.
you know a lot of them. They've been there for years, most
Yeah,
of them.
well, 60, I'm not going to give
They're
away
over
my,
62 years.
yeah, just enough. You don't have to say any more, but.
And either one of you live in Dudley, right?
Well, I now live in Northampton, Florence, Mass. I work there, but
Yeah.
when I retire, this is going to be our retirement home. And my sister lives in Holden, and she owns the cottage right next door. So we put in 2 wells and 2 septics to accommodate each of our cottages.
You realize we're doing what we can so that you can enjoy living in a nice place to live.
I do.
Okay,
Thank you. That's why we want to come back here. Thank you.
thank you.
Good luck with
Thank you.
everything. Clarinda Wood Fund balance.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put into the record that we acknowledge in a memo dated July 24th of this year that the Clarinda Wood available fund balance, which is the interest, stands at $27,353.09, and that we be mindful that this is not a bottomless pit, but that it has a fairly decent amount of money and that we continue to monitor.
Motion made to acknowledge.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Sigenovich. Any discussion, Greg? Any clarification? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Unanimous. Next up, fiscal year 2017, end-of-year transfers. Mr. Belkunis.
So the board members, is a document in your packet, fiscal year-end 2017 transfers. And everything on the top half of the page has already been approved by the Selectmen and the FAA. However, on the bottom half, it indicates that we require a transfer of $30,550.29 for the fire department, which would be fire salaries, $4,136.50, EMS night coverage, $19,429.51, and fire overtime, $6,984.28 for a grand total of $30,550.29. We're required in municipal accounting to have a balanced budget right down to the line item. So these transfers allow us to balance out and complete fiscal year 2017 with all of our accounts in good order. The source of funds would be Selectmen's expenses, operating expenses, again in the same amount of $30,550.29. Before you ask why we would have such a large amount of money remaining in Selectmen's operating expenses, we negotiated a settlement with the utility companies concerning street lighting rates. It was an issue that had been pending when I arrived in Dudley. We reached a settlement which resulted in a substantial credit coming back to Dudley. So the balance in the account reflects the credit that we received, and we applied that credit toward the street lighting account, which meant that this money was an available fund. So that's the recommendation, is to approve that transfer.
And Greg, on the other column, the EMS night coverage was intentionally.
Yeah, it was underfunded, and it's also been underfunded for the year we're in right now. And if you ask me to kind of ballpark what I think the shortfall is, somewhere between $20,000 and $24,000 short. We didn't have money, so we'll have to look at that at fall town meeting.
Okay. Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, I'm going to move that we approve the transfer of $30,550.29 from Selectmen operating expenses into the 3 fire department accounts, which include salaries, EMS night coverage, and fire overtime, and that we have a presentation by the fire chief regarding total income and total expenses for the fire department. And that's not because, anyways, that's my motion, but I'll explain why.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, seconded by Mr. Sigenovich. Explanation by Mr. Joseph.
I think people should know how much money and how successful the chief has been in increasing the amount of income or revenue from the fire department, all operations, but especially the EMS service.
And I agree, and as an aside, I think the chief gives out his report every month. There's
He does.
the percentage of missed calls or calls that we can't answer is minuscule,
Almost nothing.
and the calls that they mutual aid out, I mean, we have circumstances where we're first one on the scene, mutual aid, so.
Yeah, and we see those monthly, so we can monitor them, and he is doing a good job, but I would like an annual total, a simple annual presentation of revenue and expenditures so that people can understand and appreciate what's going on net-wise in that department. That's all.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I agree, by no means to put him on the spot, but
Yeah.
so, like what you said, Mr. Joseph, so that people understand what an asset he is and what he's doing.
You know, it's like the grants. I mean, everybody gets grants, and he gives us a detailed analysis and reporting of all his grants, and he's really found some money savers for the town, no doubt about it. Motion made by Mr. Joseph, second Mr. Sigenovich. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Student rep.
Yep.
Slacker. Just kidding. Board member comments. Mr. Joseph.
I'm going to hold.
Mr. Sigenovich.
I've got nothing right now.
I just want to, we came up a little bit earlier. I want to thank the chief. A lot of good comments from the people in the town beach area and town residents that are using it. Unfortunately, like we said, there was no major problem, but unfortunately, there have been some other ones, and people have gotten a lesson about not being there when they're not supposed to and doing things they're not supposed to be doing. So I think that's been a big, big boon for the town the last year and a half.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I was in another town, a couple towns away this weekend, doing some work, and a politico from another town said to me, "How do you guys do what you do with the lowest, one of the lowest tax rates in the state?" I just looked at him and grinned and said, "'Cause we're good." And that was it. And I meant it, and it's true. It really is true. So the beach is now a beach that's enjoyed by Dudley people, and that was a good comment, Steve.
Chief.
Just one thing to add to that is one of the issues we've been experiencing in the last few weeks with this is teenagers unsupervised there that have been causing some problems as far as either damaging things or, you know, creating nuisance problems and things like that. So it is something for the board to consider at some point. Certainly not tonight, but anything as far as if we want to consider anything about age limits on people as far as supervision goes. What's an age limit of somebody that can be there unsupervised or what have you? Because we had some issues where you have a town resident there, but they bring in a couple of their friends that are from Webster, Southbridge, and some from Auburn, something like that too. People congregating in that area. So that's
Daylight
just-
or evening hours?
Both. You're getting both.
We
So-
should be able to certainly control daylight hours.
So it's one of those things, well, I mean, you get times too, and don't forget, you only have lifeguards there certain days of the week, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of it when people aren't around there are doing that, so. It's just something to consider and keep in the back of your mind, that we might have to address that at some point with what's an age limit as far as a
Okay.
teenager or something being there, what's a cutoff point?
Chairman, can I ask?
Mr. Sigenovich. Hang on, chief.
Ask, teenagers, are we talking 14, 15, 16, 12?
Well, we've had, I think, all pretty much in that range. You know, you don't have too many that are over like 18 or anything like that, but all, you know, from middle school through high school times.
Unsupervised, so a
Yes.
bunch of 15,
Yeah,
16-year-olds?
you know, you probably have, you know, 15, 20 kids at a time, you know, down there. So some legitimately just playing ball or whatever it is, but, you know, others riding around on picnic tables and some marijuana, stuff like that, you know, different things that are going on.
Do you want to
Unsupervised.
observe it, have your staff observe it a little bit more, and then give us any recommendations as and when appropriate?
Well, I think that's why I'm just saying it right now. It's something to consider because it's going to be one of those things where what's an appropriate age group? I know the administrator and I had a little brief discussion on it, but is it something that's going to have to give some thought? Because that is, there should be ages where people are there being supervised. But then what's the cutoff age? So I think that's something we have to take a look at.
You know, we gotta be careful, because I've heard some people say we ought to be supervised. Selectmen.
Especially with your language.
They're probably
meetings.
right on
Yeah.
that one.
Lives on forever. Departmental communications, anything from anybody? Sorry for keeping you awake.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we move into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. if in fact an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on our bargaining positions.
Motion made by Mr. Joseph,
Second.
second Mr. Sigenovich. I just have one question, Mr. Town Administrator. I never chance to talk to you before about this. This is not about a personnel issue.
Negative, no personnel issues involved.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Paul Joseph, aye?
Kerry Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye. Not to convene an open
Yeah,
session.
I'm just going to add that. I forgot to say it. We will not reconvene in public session.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice, safe week.